welcome back to our next episode of Future Focused CXOs. Today I have a very special guest, Jon, and he is the President and CEO of MCG Health. Without any further delay, let me welcome Jon to the podcast. Welcome, Jon. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well.
Would you like to give a quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, I started my career as an actuary, as part of a consulting actuary at Milliman, but then with time grew out of that and into Milliman Care Guidelines and now MCG, for which I'm president. So I'm no longer an actuary, but we've been growing MCG and I've been in this role for about 15 years or so.
And you had a great, fantastic career for 40 plus years, Jon. And I would love to ask you a first question about walking us through your journey and highlighting some of the great transition points you had in your career.
When I think about now, with the benefit of age, looking back at what I went through, what I think about is when I was in college, I was a math geek, and that was the primary focus. And then I became an actuary, and I realized, oh, here's some great problems to solve in the realm of actuarial science. And with time, I switched my frame of thinking from actuarial problems to business problems. And within Milliman, started up a number of different practices and products that we had and really thought about it as developing business. And then my fourth step from business was to leadership and realizing that business was more about leadership than it is individually solving the problems that are out there. And so over my career, I've done that. And I'd say specifically the key points. One was within Milliman deciding rather than being part of a larger practice, I wanted to start my own. So I moved to Denver and started our Milliman Health practice. And that allowed me within the Milliman structure to invest in a lot of those practices and so forth that we talked about. And then within that structure came the opportunity essentially to buy from other partners within Milliman, the Milliman Care Guidelines. And there's a group of 15 of us who did that purchase for an internal transfer. And that started my journey with MCG. And then eventually became CEO. And then after that, went through the process where we decided a product doesn't fit that well in a consulting firm and went to Hearst where it was a group of products. And so we've been growing really into a medical technology company inside of Hearst, where back at Milliman, we were more of the intellectual content that we were focused on. So those are probably the key places that I've gone through over the years. So MCG still does provide medical content around what's the appropriate actions in various settings of healthcare. So what's medically appropriate? When should you have an admission? When should you look at an image, et cetera? Then our product became thinking about that in the workflow of the case manager, both at a hospital and at a payer, and helping them document and make those decisions. But the technology we're focused on right now is one in which we are reading the electronic medical record to match up against our guidelines, so that process can become more automated and in some ways more trustworthy so that the best decisions are made in a shorter time period than they were before.
And since you are into healthcare, I think the first question comes to everybody's mind is healthcare was going through a digital transformation, but COVID definitely accelerated that. And we saw a tremendous amount of change in the way providers were connecting with patients. So my question really to you is that now, in this post-COVID era, what kind of digital transformation is happening into the healthcare space, and how is that really going to impact the provider-patient relationship?
Yeah, so from our own point of view, the first thing that affected us was that we needed to write some new guidance for COVID because there was no evidence on that before we went in. And we wrote some based on viral illnesses in general, although we've since made it specific to COVID. And there was a big transformation in the hospitals during that time when they were inundated with the COVID cases, so that some services which had been done in the hospital moved out because the hospitals were overwhelmed and people didn't want to be there if they didn't have COVID. So certain surgeries and so forth moved to an outpatient setting. And some of those have stuck. So while the hospitals maybe would like to have them back, to some degree, they're staying in that sort of outpatient setting. Maybe the bigger deal that's also happened is because of the tough working situations, it's led to shortages, especially of nurses. And so the hospitals and others are struggling with staffing on that side. And so they're looking at ways they can do things again more automated and get to a place where the nurses can focus on the patient care more than anything else and take away some of the things that are not in that overall realm. So they're moving in that direction right now as well. And a lot of hospitals are struggling with that overall staffing right now.
Yeah, definitely. So what you're trying to say is that the kind of digital transformation and automation that is happening is primarily driven by shortage of staff.
And I would say more that it's accelerated by that. It was starting, people were not happy with the overall prior authorization form that was going on. And so looking for better ways to do it. And now people realize they have to do it because they don't have the staffing to do it the old way.
You just touched upon a little bit, but what was the impact of COVID on your business operations? Because everybody started working remote. You're in a very highly regulated industry. So how did you cope about it? And primarily also highlight upon the impact it had on the culture, because we were all in office, we were mingling together, having a lot of coffee conversations, and suddenly we became remote. So how did you guys cope up with that?
So the first thing I would note is that before COVID, our company was about half remote. So our developers and our product people and some of the corporate functions were in our office in Seattle. But a lot of other people, our editors, our salespeople, our account managers, our educators, we're all remote because it's just as easy to be remote, and others because it kept them closer to the customers. So we've, for a long time, had a tradition of what I would call pouring the glue back into the company. So making sure that we have events where we're getting everybody together and connecting with them and so forth. So when COVID happened, we all went remote, of course, but the infrastructure is ready for that because we were used to it before that point. And we looked for ways we could pour the glue back in. It didn't work out when we were all remote. But since then, our office has changed from a place that people go into work to a place that people go in to collaborate. And so my direction to managers is it's good to get people into the office, but don't get them into the office for fake reasons, get them in for good reasons. And so they're not coming in all that often, but when they do, they really appreciate it. We in particular have started this year something we're calling MCG week. So every month there's 1 week where we say, this is the time where everybody will be there, and we know the executive team will be there and others. And so that just creates a natural connection point. So we're continuing with our glue that we had before with retreats for our customer success staff and all staff meetings and other sales meetings. And then we're adding on top of that the MCG weeks, and we're continuing to figure it out. I think that's where everybody is too.
That is a great thing. I think many companies are mandating, saying that you need to be in the office for 2 days, 3 days. And what you are saying is you're not mandating that. In fact, you're telling the manager that get the team together when collaboration really makes sense. Certain things you can only talk through, only do some whiteboarding sessions, right? Or some challenging problems you can only solve by getting your team together. So that's a great advice, because we are going into a new normal and everybody is trying to figure out what's going to be the new work culture. Right? But I believe what you are trying to do is the right way to see. If you need to be 4 days in the office for collaboration, in a week, be there. That makes more sense. But one question comes to my mind is that a lot of companies adopted technologies to really make these collaboration and remote things and everything work. What kind of technology you guys are using, and did you adopt any new technology?
So I would say in some ways we adopted too many technologies. So the feedback we got from staff is, can we limit our number of tools? So we're going the other direction. But we went through and we said, okay, if it's online, we're going to use Teams, and maybe for big meetings, we'll use Zoom. If it's chat piece, we tried to say Teams, but then the developers said, we have to have our Slack. So we let them keep Slack. And then we're looking at Confluence as a way that we do shared documents and shared pieces. So we're trying to limit it down in that direction. I guess SharePoint would be another tool we use in that direction. We're trying to not have too many, because then that just keeps your head spinning and distracting you all the time from all the different places you might have to be looking.
Oh, yeah. And I myself face that, right? The moment there is some new tool, I say, oh my gosh, now I have to learn this. I have to remember its user ID password, and it is one more piece of technology to remember. So absolutely, many companies are going through that rationalization. But on your business operations side, did you had to change anything or adopt any extra tools to make your business operations work?
A lot of the things we had in place before are still effective because since we were half remote, we had a lot of things that we needed to do there. Our technology is going through changes, but not because of COVID, more just because we're in the process of redoing our stack.
So I think the final question I will ask you, because you have a tremendous amount of experience, you went through a big journey of where you are today. And a lot of executives, especially the new ones who are just getting into the CXO chair, are thinking about how do I grow? What kind of advice would you have to the new generation CXOs that are coming in?
Yeah, so I would say sometimes people say, what kind of leader should you be to do various things? And the best answer I've figured out is yourself. So don't try and transform yourself into something else because that's what a leader is. Because guess what? People will see that as not you. And so stay true to yourself and lead in that way. So every leader is different and there's not a standard way to do it. Having said that, though, the most important things from my point of view is being very transparent in what you're doing. I often tell people, I'll tell you anything about the company except what HR tells me I can't say. And I'll tell you some of that and be in the place where you can let other people succeed as opposed to trying to succeed yourself. And in that way, you can sit back, let people succeed, intervene when you have to, but make that less of the time rather than more of the time.
So what you're advising is, number one, be yourself. Don't try to put any masks. Second is be transparent, because trust is built on transparency, right? And third thing that you are really saying is that allow people to operate. Don't micromanage them, but only intervene when they need advice and when they need guidance.
Yes, yep, absolutely. And I'll brag one piece. We were working on our culture and values and so forth, did an internal survey, and the committee, ranking all various things, said, which of these values distinguish MCG from prior places you've worked? And the one that got the highest score for that was integrity. So I was very pleased with that answer. And I think that comes back to both being yourself and being transparent, because people know that what you're doing, they can trust it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Thank you so much for taking time to talk.
My pleasure.
Me.